What's good, everybody? And it's that time again where I talk to you in front of the camera as we wander around the lovely, beautiful city of Hanami. Guys, this is a free game, by the way. Just letting y'all know, you could download this for free right now, boot up, play through some great, amazingly detailed open world maps, come to Hanami, which is a feast for the eyeballs in its artistry and its color palette. And you could do that all for free. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that amazing? We're going to be talking about the Hoyofication of Kuro games, or specifically Wuthering Waves. And does that even exist? Is that even real? And what does that really mean? Because I think Wuthering Waves, it's been out for a year and a half at this point. I think it's around about a year and a half, give or take X amount of months. And it's definitely been on a journey. And its identity has absolutely changed over time. And I think with 3.0 very close on the horizon, I think it's important to establish where the game currently sits and where the game currently is at. So I believe when wuwa first launched and when wuwa first came around, the community was filled with a lot of people who came from other gacha games, obviously, from Genshin Impact, from Honkai Star Rail, from the Arknights community, Tower of Fantasy. There's a lot, you know, it's a gacha central. It was the next big upcoming gacha game, and it took a little bit from everyone of all those communities into Wuthering Waves, right? And there definitely was a sort of spin on how the community wanted to perceive Wuthering Waves. It was constantly being compared to other titles, namely Genshin Impact. I think we all know this, and I'm here to say I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm someone who definitely contributed to it, you know, comparing wuwa to basically what is, you know, it's a lot of called a reskin of Genshin Impact but more mature, right? The game's like architecture is rooted in a game like Genshin Impact, like 100%. Absolutely no one can deny that. And a lot of the player base at the time are gacha players of these other games, or they also play those other games in conjunction with Wuthering Waves. And wuwa didn't really have its own sort of identity when it first came out. It didn't have its own fandom. It didn't have its own player base that spawned from nothing as much. It's mainly collected from other communities, and there's nothing wrong with that, because fandoms have to grow over time. You have to collect a fandom, you have to grow your audience, and that's how wuwa started out. It started out as trying to prove itself worthy of being one of the big dogs of gacha. It really did. It had to earn its spot. And a lot of people and a lot of creators and a lot of people in the community, we all felt like wuwa had to earn its stripes. We had to show why wuwa was good, why it did things better, to be worthy of users, to be worthy of player base, to be worthy of your time. And it was almost like we had to kind of like fight for the rights of Wuthering Waves almost. Like people had to fight for why wuwa should exist and why it's a good concept, because it did a lot of things that other games did, but better in other people's eyes. Whether it was from story, from the music, to the character designs, a lot of people, you know, were fighting for what wuwa was up for and what it was doing. And that kind of became a lot of wuwa's identity for a while. People obviously were into the story. 1.0, it wasn't as much discussion about stories as 2.x and beyond, but we'll get into that. It was more about the gameplay, the feel, the difficulty, the end game, the actual combat mechanics, all that sort of stuff was used to say, hey, this is why wuwa is kind of a step up. It seems like an upgrade from all these other things, and here are all the reasons why. And those were very attractive reasons for people to come by and swing by the game and give it a try and just stick around. Why would you rather play this than this thing? Or why you should play this game alongside all the other games? Why you should give Wuthering Waves your time? And it was a lot to do with its QOL changes, the way it did its cinematics, the way it did its gameplay and combat and its endgame and its events, or why people hopped on in the first place. But now, a year and a half later, and the scope has changed. Wuthering Waves no longer has to prove why it's deserving of being one of the top gachas. It's now just kind of accepted that it is. They have massively, you know, improved their storytelling and the story writing over time. It's debated if it's consistently improved. That's maybe a discussion for another time. But the way it shows its story, the way it tells it, the music, the OSTs, the cinematics, the trailers even getting better over time, a lot of the artistry behind wuwa, even the maps themselves getting more and more detailed. 2.0 was an insane wake up to an insanely detailed world that we hadn't quite seen before. Flight mechanics and exploration increases, and there were so many more reasons to love Wuthering Waves throughout all of 2.x. There were so many more reasons to love it. And wuwa went from being a game of like, here's why it's really good and on all the others and it's better and why it's deserving of your time. At that point, it becomes normalized. That's the status quo. We know why, the reasons why people like Wuthering Waves. And then it became a point of growing its normal player base. People that might not have played Gachas before coming to play Wuthering Waves because they keep hearing people talk about it. And what do people share on social media? What are people sharing? Are they sharing the combat events that are going on in wuwa? Are they sharing... What are they... No, they're not. They're not sharing combat events. They're sharing story moments. They're sharing screenshots of the game. They're sharing cool things about OSTs. They're sharing character trailers. They're sharing cool things that their character animations are doing. That's what people are sharing around on social media. That's what gets attention from outside audiences. And that's what gets people to come into the Wuthering Waves community and become part of a fandom. Wuthering Waves started to grow its own fandom after 2.0. Again, from 1.0 to 2.0, it's all about all the people from other fandoms coming in to trying out the game and seeing what it's like. But after 2.0, it's a case of growing its own fandom and its own community and its own player base who really just predominantly maybe like Wuthering Waves, or it's their gacha of choice. It's their preferred one. And we're seeing a lot of that growth over the course of 2.x. Now with that, the increase of fandom becomes the increase in all that lovely good stuff that we see in fandoms, right? We love to see it. Whenever you have fandoms or standoms, if you've ever been part of like a stan, if you've ever been a stan of something or been in one of those sorts of circles, you know what it's like, okay? People get really, really, really intense into it. People get very, very intense. There could be dramas, there could be praise, people glazing over the smallest thing. Oh my god, look how my character sat today. 3,000 likes, 100 retweets of like whatever. And wuwa started to enter that territory of really picking up its own fandoms. And I think that is correlated to the Hoyofication of Wuthering Waves. Because what do games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail do so well? Create fandoms, their own user base who just likes to post about the games they love, get involved about the games they love, have their own bubbles of communities where they share things and get involved, and they just main the sort of game as it almost becomes a personality trait to most people, right? Dedicated accounts for Genshin Impact characters, right? That sort of stuff, the very niche fandom that's very intense. And Wuthering Waves over the course of this last year started to do the exact same thing as its player base increased, and that is not really to be a shock. You know, again, it went from a game that had to prove why it existed to a game that's racking up its own individual unique audience and fandom, and that's what's happening. And when you have fandoms, you also get the really toxic individuals who would fight it tooth and nail to a fault. You have people who will want to ruin another fandom. We always see the Hoyo versus wuwa fandoms, or Genshin Twitter try to astroturf on wuwa Twitter sorts of things, and vice versa. And the ZZZ community versus wuwa, and they're actually best friends. There's a lot. There's a lot, and it's all to do with fandom. So when I hear people talk about like the Hoyofication of Wuthering Waves and oh, the wuwa community is going downhill, everyone's becoming so toxic now, I really don't think that's the case, that the community is becoming more toxic. I really just think the player base has increased so much and developed its own audience that we're just seeing, really, for the first time, the overwhelmingness that a fandom creates. This is what it is to be in a fandom, especially if you follow Wuthering Waves on Twitter. You know how it feels. to most people who don't use Twitter or use social media and follow gacha communities, will probably have really no really clue of what I'm referring to or talking about. They just play the game and they go and live their life afterwards. They have no idea about these fandoms that exist online. But to those of us who do, we know how large they are and how big they are and how much of a voice these things get and how much drama seems to come from random social media things all the time. And I really think that's just kind of where Wuthering Waves is at right now. It is in that state of fandomness and people getting really into it. And for some people, that's you know, a great thing. That means more content for the game, more sharing of cool things of the media that you love, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The downside being you're gonna get people who are gonna have very strong opinions, very strong opinions, and probably might not be the most tolerant, as a lot of fandoms tend to have. Again, if you've been part of a fandom, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People getting a little bit too lost in the sauce. And people, you know, we've seen that with like the Hoyo community, because the Hoyo community for games is so overwhelmingly large. Like it is so big. Okay, it is so massive, and you see stuff there that happens all the time. The amount of like silly things that have come from Twitter all the time, we're gonna see that with Wuthering Waves 2 now, because there are simply just a lot of people playing the game. And I have to be real, look at what 2.7 has, or 2.8 has done. When 2.8 came out, according to Steam, again, Steam is only a very small minority of players, but it's a good idea for trends. But on Steam anyway, there are more people that came back for 2.8 than 2.7, right? So it's not like people are suddenly not caring about Wuthering Waves anymore, and like Kuro's killing their own game like Hoyoverse has. That's also like a narrative or a thing that I particularly disagree with. More people have come back for 2.8 than they did for the finale of Rinascita. The actual finale of Rinascita, more people on Steam came back for the beginning of 2.8 than the finale of Rinascita. Like, what the bloody hell is going on? Obviously, the drop-off is way more, and people are here to do the story and probably dip and wait for 3.0, which the drip marketing should be out in a couple of days' time, and I'm rather excited, I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's gonna be pretty cool. And that's really kind of where we're at with Wuthering Waves. I think we have to remember, Wuthering Waves hasn't really changed. There's nothing in particular about Wuwa that has changed since the beginning of 2.0. I went back earlier and I looked through all the version history, even since 1.3. 1.3 was really the turning point of when things really started to kick into gear, and they changed the storytelling, the cinematics, up the quality. They really changed the whole theme of Wuthering Waves. And I have to say, apart from like now companion quests are like baked into stories in some way, Wuwa hasn't particularly changed from its events to its story to its characters to how the stories are told with characters. Nothing in particular is different. The only really thing that's different is the lack of combat events that have happened since like 2.4, which again is really, it's a very valid point. It's a very valid thing to take note of. But that's not a combat event is not what's going to drive new people to play the game. And I don't think a combat event is what's going to keep a game alive. Talk on social media is what kind of keep communities going. Because that's what if you want to be part of a community, it's on social medias, right? And it's all about the story, the characters, the cinematics, the trailers, the animations. It's all the little things. It's everything but the events most of the time when it comes to what people like to share. And obviously, Chisa and that whole drama and how much people like her and her character is something that sparked a lot of conversation about 2.8. And of course, people are curious and they come and try out the game. And now for 3.0, we're going to see a new rise in players again. Probably new people who are like, okay, it's 3.0. Maybe it's time for me to start Wuwa. It's time for me to start playing the game. And the fandoms are going to grow even more. I think we just have to be aware now that, yes, people are going to treat a game like Wuthering Waves more like they do Hoyo communities or fandoms or Genshin Impact fandoms. And I think that's totally okay. And honestly, it's what people want, and it's kind of what the game needs to thrive. You need people who dedicate their time into creating content for the game, sharing content about the game, and I think that's like needed and required. I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. Obviously, silly people are going to have silly opinions, and we'll always be here to talk about those silly opinions, but I don't see it as this net negative overall of Wu is getting Hoyofied. Wu is getting Hoyofied. That's it. That's the end. I actually think it's a pretty positive thing. for the game overall, for its survivability and to continue onwards. So it's kind of my thoughts about all these things. And do I think this is a bad thing? No, I don't think anyone should worry. Wuthering Waves has always kind of been the same game. The characters they come out with still have intricate combat mechanics. The gameplay is still, you know, very different and unique, and it could be fun. It's not changed. I think we have to bear that in mind. Wuthering Waves has not changed, but the player base has, and the community has, and I don't see it as a negative. And I see it as a honestly kind of a positive for the livelihood and the upkeep of the game. You need fandoms for games to survive. So that's kind of my closing thoughts on the whole situation. So I appreciate y'all. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Twitch.tv/Captain Cabinetz, Captain Cabinetz.